everyone understands that Joe Biden is looking for a running mate. Supposedly, he would have just picked his running mate last week. Now, he did not pick his running mate. In fact, we're still waiting on him to pick a running mate. I asked a question during one of my last videos about this. I said, does it matter who Joe Biden picks as a running mate? Yes, it matters who he picks as a running mate, because Joe Biden does not incite confidence. There's reason to believe, based on the characteristics of Joe Biden, that Joe Biden, even himself, said he would only serve one term. If Joe Biden is elected, he says he's only going to serve one term. What does that mean? That would mean that who he picks as a VP is very important. Probably the most important VP pick ever. Now, I would feel much better if that VP pick was someone who was progressive, who would put forth the policy platforms that we embrace. I embrace those same platforms I think that most of you do. Medicare for all, Green New Deal, environmental justice, criminal justice reform, the end of mass incarceration, legalizing cannabis. There's a number of issues. Relieving student debt. These are issues that we embrace. Water is life. Water is life. But every time I turn around, what appears to be a fascination with the Democratic Party are law enforcement personnel. Yes, right, people tied to the law enforcement. What is it with the Democrats and law enforcement? If it's not a prosecutor, a former prosecutor, it's an attorney general. If it's not an attorney general, it's a police chief. Everywhere I look, the Democratic Party has a fixation on law and order. Now, you would think in a time of civil unrest, in a time where more Democrats and more liberals, more independents are taking to the streets, demanding reform of our police departments, demanding a recalibration of how we do policing, if not an outright defunding of police. You would think that now would be the worst time, the worst possible time for the Democratic Party to try to float yet another cop. Will you be wrong? Democratic Party is now looking at Val Demings. Val Demings, first black female police chief of Orlando, Florida. Very accomplished lady. I'm not here to suggest that she's not very accomplished. She is very accomplished. But do we need another cop? Now, just based on the profession itself, I have my issues. I've clearly stated that. I wonder why we can't. We can't. America, why America can't have other professions be considered for the top or the second slot? Why can't we have some nurses or doctors, some activists, some engineers? Why does it always have to be someone from law enforcement? It's just a question. Are there no others? And if there has to be someone from the criminal justice wing or some profession tied to criminal justice, why can't it be probation officers or treatment center folks or people who get folks out of jail, out of the criminal justice system? Why does the Democratic Party seem to continually embrace those who in jail incarcerate people? And then we say, oh, if you don't accept that, if you don't embrace yet another professional whose job was to cycle people through what we will agree is a biased, classist, racially discriminatory, bigoted system. A system that they can always say, well, I'm too small, it's too big a system, what could I do? Now, even if you want to suggest that Val Demings is not responsible for all of the trepidation, all of the issues concerning law enforcement in America, I'd have to agree with that. She's not. But there are things about her record that bring one to raise an eyebrow or two. An Orlando police officer shoved a 27-year-old Hispanic woman down some stairs, breaking her ankle. He was ordered by a court, not by Tim Black, not by a bunch of progressive civil uprising youth, listening to Killer Mike songs. No. Mac Miller. No. By court, he was ordered to pay her medical bills. Val Demings stuck by him. Saw nothing wrong with him throwing the woman down the stairs. An officer slammed an 84-year-old World War II veteran on his head, breaking his neck during a disagreement involving a tow truck. 88-year-old man in an argument with the tow guy, towing his car, tapped the officer's arm, trying to persuade the officer to stop the tow. The officer gets mad at the 88-year-old man, picks him up and slams him on his head, breaking his neck. That man was awarded $880,000. Once again, he wasn't awarded that by friends of the Tim Black Show. He was awarded that by court. Val Demings stuck by the officer. Nothing wrong with what he did. That's what you got to do. Sometimes you got to slam 88-year-old men on top of their heads because they are a threat to life, a threat to safety of the officer. Outside a Target store, officers investigated a robbery, surrounded a minivan, and fired into it nearly a dozen times, critically injuring an unarmed man. He won a $750,000 settlement. One of the people in the car was shot 5 times. Val Demings sides with the officer. Now, look, I'm not saying that another police chief wouldn't have done the same thing. What I'm saying is that we don't need more police chiefs to do that. We want to change the culture of policing. We want to change the tenor, the way that what's acceptable in policing in this country. And Val Demings has been a supporter of these atrocities. She's being a supporter. She's part of the problem here, evidenced by her track record. Now, some people, I think I did see Ari Melber. And I like Ari Melber. He covered this on MSNBC. He covered Val Demings extensively. Did a 12-minute video about Val Demings. In the first 6 minutes, he was very complimentary of her. Then he questioned a couple of things for the next minute and a half, and then he went right back to being more so complimentary. I would just like to add to that and say Val Demings did bring down the amount of crime between 2007 and 2010 in Orlando. Or she's attributed that reduction of crime. Well, if you're going to attribute to her the reduction of crime in Orlando, Florida, between 2007, she was the chief there 2007 to 2011. If you're going to give her the credit for that, you have to give her credit for the rapid increase of police brutality cases as well in that same time period. Orlando had tripled the amount police brutality claims of any other department its size in Florida. Conspicuously, this is not included in the coverage that I've seen of Val Demings. Instead, I hear platitudes of her wanting to side with the investigation into George Floyd's murder. But when it was her time and when she was on the job, when she was the one who could make these tough calls, she sided with the police union every time. I cannot find a single solitary instance where Val Demings bucked the system at all. And here's the thing. I'm not going to suggest it's easy to buck the system for Kamala Harris or Amy Klobuchar or Val Demings. You're up against it. I heard a story, a horrific story of a police officer who tried to stop a fellow police officer from beating a civilian who was handcuffed. That police officer was banned by her office, by her fellow colleagues. She was shunned and she was fired. Her pension forfeited. She was 1 year away from retirement. So I'm not going to suggest at all, guys, that it's not difficult for Amy Klobuchar, for Kamala Harris, or for Val Demings to take a stand against the police union and against law enforcement when they are a member of that institution. That's why I'm clearly saying we don't need any more cops. If you want Joe Biden to become president of the United States, it would behoove those in power to consider these words and consider them heavily. The days of over-policing, the days of bias, racial profiling, the days of police brutality being swept under the rug are over. If not for you, it's for us. And if you proceed down this road and you lose in November, you have no one to blame. Don't blame Jill Stein. Don't blame Susan Sarandon, Anita Turner, Dr. Cornel West, or anyone. Blame your decisions on who's going to be VP. Now, there are other options besides the cops. You have. Hey, if you got to go criminal justice, Michelle Alexander. I agree with Michael Moore. Michelle Alexander is an exact type of person that understands policing and understands law enforcement. She just understands it from a different vantage point. I do understand that Nina Turner is available. Look her up. But Val Demings is not the person for the time.